go back to the Commission of Inquiry into State Capture now. Our reporter Liabo Setho has been following today's proceedings. Let's cross to her. Good afternoon, Liabo. What came out today?
Good afternoon, Zinga. Well, today we had Mr. Kgathatso Thlakudi, who is the Deputy Director General at the Department of Enterprise. In the first half of the morning, he painted a picture of just how important the Denel asset is to South Africa. Of course, the Department of Public Enterprises oversees Denel, state-owned enterprises such as Denel and Eskom, for instance. And he has talked about the value that it is and how it is internationally recognized, and how it has over the years has done so well in terms of revenue collection. And to the latter end of the first morning part, just before we went to break, he emphasized the importance of how intellectual property of Denel and of the sovereign had to be protected. The reason he touched on this was that we know that around 2014, 15 or thereabouts, we had, you could call it orders from countries such as Saudi Arabia putting up their hands to say that they want to be part of Denel or a subsidiary to be sold to them, or vice versa. And that would mean that they would have access to state-owned intellectual property, or the know-how of how South Africa manufactures arms intended for war, flights, military flights, and all the other products that Denel actually manufactures. So he emphasized that it is important that South Africa keeps the intellectual property in place and never sells it to anyone. It has been dubbed the jewel of the country. In the latter part of his testimony, just before now at break time, he spoke about the composition of boards at Denel. This is important, Nzinga, because we know that around 2014 we saw that the boards of Denel were changed, or the board of Denel was changed, and there was a lot of article and unhappiness about the kind of people that had been selected to go onto that boards. The reason that is important, of course, is because of corporate governance structures in such entities as big as Denel. It is important to have people who actually are qualified and understand the work of Denel. He mentioned a couple of people who he said, had questionable backgrounds, and others who had been struck off the roll of attorneys and yet had been appointed to the boards. Of course, at that time, it was the time that Minister Lynn Brown had taken over the realms. He says at that time it was a wrong decision to make, because that is when you could say the beginning of financial ruin began for Denel, seeing expenditure that irresponsible expenditure going up to 500 million rands, and the company posting significant losses. And we expect that by the conclusion of his testimony, we will find out how certain companies such as VR Laser, which was led by Mr. Duduzane Zuma and Mr. One of the Gupta brothers, were involved in VR Laser wanting to sell Denel to Asia, calling it Denel Asia. At this point, we are still building up to finding out what role the board played in the financial ruin of Denel at the time.
Liabo Setho giving us an update from that Judicial Commission of Inquiry into allegations of state capture, and she'll keep us updated throughout the course of the day. Those are your news headlines, your market news coming up after a short break. Please stay with us.